Hey everybody, this is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous good-looking friends. So, Harry and Meghan finally dropped their Christmas card or holiday card, Hanukkah card or Kwanzaa card. Not really sure what's going on here. This is not a joke. This is what they just released. My first reaction is that this was very sloppy. And I say that because of this play button that's stuck in the middle of the card. At least they could have edited that out. I think maybe this went out in haste, but now this is going viral everywhere. I've checked. There's no video that's supposed to be there. That legitimately has been on the still image. When you look at the top of this, you gotta think to yourself, were they writing on stationery or was this supposed to go out on stationery? Because who puts on behalf of the office on a Christmas card? Especially now you're being redundant with your names, Prince Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Like it's too much. And then adding Archwell Productions and Archwell Foundation. Well, what happened to Archwell Audio? Is that an indicator that Meghan's no longer in the podcasting business? It's just a very cold card. It's like, happy holiday season. Thanks for all the support in 2023. I'm wondering if that's supposed to be sarcastic because, this is just a whole lot of nothing. And maybe that's what they want to represent because 2023 was a whole lot of nothing. But what do you guys think? This is uninspiring and such a joke. At least feature your kids in some way. This is, so corporate and disconnected from the rest of the world. It just makes you wonder, did they just half-ass it and put it together? Also, too, if they're talking about Archwell Productions and Archwell Foundation, well, at least put the 5 staff members that you're paying like $500,000 on it. You know what I'm saying? Just ridiculous. Everything about it. I have to say, being an ultimate failure at everything is pretty much on brand for the Sussex. And, I'm not surprised that this too also has failed. But let's move into the bigger talk that's been going on today, which is Prince Harry's court case and the apparent landmark so-called win. So Harry's lawyer, David Sherborne, was ready to go the moment the verdict came down. And this is what he said.
The court has ruled that unlawful and criminal activities were carried out at all 3 Mirror Group newspaper titles, The Mirror, The Sunday Mirror and The People, on a habitual and widespread basis for over more than a decade. I'd like to thank my legal team for so successfully dismantling the sworn testimony of Mirror Group's senior executives, legal department and journalists who at least turned up to court, unlike their colleagues who were perhaps too afraid to do so. This case is not just about hacking. It is about a systemic practice of unlawful and appalling behaviour, followed by cover-ups and destruction of evidence, the shocking scale of which can only be revealed through these proceedings. The court has found that Mirror Group's principal board directors, their legal department, senior executives and editors such as Piers Morgan clearly knew about or were involved in these illegal activities. Between them, they even went as far as lying under oath to Parliament during the Leveson inquiry, to the Stock Exchange, and to us all ever since. The journey to justice can be a slow and painful one, and since bringing my claim almost 5 years ago, defamatory stories and intimidating tactics have been deployed against me and at my family's expense. And so, as I too have learnt through this process, patience is in fact a virtue, especially in the face of vendetta journalism. I hope that the court's findings will serve as a warning to all media organisations who have employed these practices and then similarly lied about them. Mirror Group's actions were so calculated and misleading that their pattern of destroying evidence and concealing their unlawful behaviour continued into the litigation itself, and as the judge has ruled, even to this day. I am happy to have won the case, especially given that this trial only looked at a quarter of my entire claim. Even on just that, it is clear Mirror Group's persistent attempts to suggest that my claim was, to quote their counsel, fantastical, in the realms of total speculation, and there was simply no evidence at all to suggest I was hacked. Zilch, zero, nil, nada, niente, absolutely nothing. All of that was total nonsense and was used maliciously to attack my character and credibility. However, as Mirror Group intended, those hollow sound bites were blasted across front pages and across online platforms and into the next day's morning television shows. The court has in fact confirmed that all four claimants were subjected to voicemail interception and unlawful information gathering, but no one would have believed that was the case given how this trial was covered in the UK. My commitment to seeing this case through is based on my belief in our need and collective right to a free and honest press, and one which is properly accountable when necessary. That is what we need in Britain and across the globe. Anything else is poisoning the well for a profession we all depend on. The acts listed in this judgment are prime examples of what happens when the power of the press is abused. I respectfully call upon the authorities, the financial regulator, the stock market, who were deliberately deceived by Mirror Group, and indeed the Metropolitan Police and prosecuting authorities, to do their duty for the British public and to investigate bringing charges against the company and those who have broken the law. Today's ruling is vindicating and affirming. I've been told that slaying dragons will get you burned, but in light of today's victory and the importance of what is needed for a free and honest press.
Boy, the media is making you feel like this was a historic, bank breaking judgment that came down today on this court case against MGN. Justice Fancourt today came down with his verdict on the damages for the misuse of private information, aka phone hacking. So the judgment handed down today pertained to four claimants that brought claims against MGN, in which we all know this is stemming from the Levinson inquiry and the big phone hacking scandal. Since 2011, there have been many claims brought forward against the Rupert Murdoch empire. In the majority of those cases, they were settled out of court. David Sherborne had been a constant fixture on these types of cases. So it's not surprising you see a similar structure set up to the other lawsuit that Harry is a part of with Elton John, Baroness Lawrence, Elizabeth Hurley. If you look at those details, it's pretty much falling in line with the same characters like Graham Johnson being a part of it, gathering information with Hacked Off, Byline Investigates. I mean, when you look deeper into this, you realize that this is a racket, in my opinion. Now, of course, the optics that's being spun here is that, yes, this is a victory for keeping the press accountable and why there needs to be more regulation in place so this doesn't happen. There is a push and there is a movement to restrict and control the media and stifle free speech. When you're looking at this from a monetary perspective, the award itself is not a win. Maybe it's a win for the lawyers, which I think the only one that's benefiting from this is David Sherborne. But Harry and the other three claimants, I see this as a huge loss for them. Harry was originally seeking £440,000 or $560,000, which, as you can see, he received a third of that. Keep in mind, to get to this verdict, this was a 7-week hearing in which resources had been used, time was taken in order to do this. So, do I think that this judgment and the award is something special? No, this is a joke, in my opinion. It's essentially one big expensive PR stunt just to prove the point that, oh, we need tighter regulation around the press and everything that Harry is doing is right. The only thing I see accomplished here is feeding Harry's ego so he can continue this crusade on taking down the press and silencing people. I honestly believe that Harry doesn't care to waste money because his whole entire life he never had to think about money. So, what we're seeing with Archwell and the losses that they took, I truly don't get the impression that he is worried or sees that running out of money is a problem because this in itself was a big waste. Similar situation with Megan and her court case where she only won $1. Think about all the legal fees she had to pay back, but they don't care. They think that it was worth it because at the end of the day, it proved them so called right. And that's all they care about. They want to be proven right. And in this case, even though when you dig into the details, it's not all what the media is portraying it to be. They are spinning this as if Harry's victory was like slaying the beast, but you got to look through it. And that's what we're going to do right now. I do think the only thing that's gonna bother Prince Harry is, 1, he didn't get the amount that he asked for, and 2, it's a lot less than what his brother got when he settled out of court. We all know that these 2 can never be satisfied with what they have. They're gonna fester about the unfairness of how Prince William got more than Harry in this kind of court case. Don't be surprised if we start seeing them complain about that now. Now, the judgment that came down today was like over 300 pages. So I'm just going to give you some of the highlights that I found interesting. And I'll link below where you can find the actual document if you want to read the whole entire thing yourself. My opinion, sadly, is extremely biased because of how much I know about what has been going on and the various individuals that were involved. Take, for instance, Omid Scobie. Remember, he gave a witness statement for this court case and he lied about his relationship with the Duke of Sussex, saying that he was not friends with him and didn't know him or have his contact information. None of us believe that. We've seen Omid Scobie lie on a global platform, and also he lied in Meghan's court case. So why would this be any different? What shocked me is what Justice Fancourt said about him as a witness. Stated here, Mr. Omid Scobie, a journalist with a particular interest in writing about the lives of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, gave evidence that when a student of journalism, he spent a week on the showbiz desk of The People and a week with the Mirror's 3 a.m. team. All good up until this bullet point, where he writes Mr. Scobie was pressed hard about the likely veracity of these accounts about some evidence that he gave in the Duchess of Sussex's litigation and about his motive in giving evidence on behalf of the claimants. He said that he remembered the incidents very well because it was at such a formative stage of his education in journalism, and he was shocked by what he learned. I found Mr. Scobie to be a straightforward and reliable witness, and I accept what he said about Mr. Morgan's involvement in the Minogue Gooding story. No evidence was called by MGN to contradict it. Now, we all know that Meghan and Harry hate Piers Morgan, particularly Meghan, because of Piers being the very first to call out Meghan's lies. We also know that Scobie has gone on record for this couple and lied many times over. So, why would this be any different? I would like to see Piers address this and come forward to call out if this is true or not. If MGM didn't contest it, I wonder if it was something that was just overlooked or there was so much else that was going on that this kind of went under the radar. But the fact that the justice thinks that Mr. Scobie is straightforward and was telling the truth makes me seriously question the justice's judgment because he also said the same thing about Graham Johnson. I'd like to read what he says about Graham Johnson because I feel it's extremely contradictory. The important witness I need to address at this stage is Graham Johnson, on whose evidence the claimants strongly rely. He is now an author and investigative journalist and producer of and consultant to television documentaries on organized crime. He was employed by the News of the World as a junior reporter in the features department from 1995 to 1997, and then at the Sunday Mirror, becoming its investigations editor from 1999 to 2005. He wrote a book, Hack, detailing his experience of tabloid journalism and has written many articles on the subject of illegal news gathering techniques for BylineInvestigates.com, among other online publications. Remember, Byline Investigates were the ones who put out this hit piece against the royal family, particularly targeting Dan Wooten and getting him completely canceled. Harry and Meghan were tied to funding this smear campaign through the Sugars. Sarah Data was specifically raising money to fund this calculated propaganda hit piece by Harry and Meghan. Given Graham Johnson's shady past and his current employment, as well as his support for Prince Harry, doesn't really make me see him as a credible witness like Omid Scobie. Just saying, but the justice felt differently. So he goes on to say, Mr. Johnson said that although, when at the News of the World, he acted as a dishonest blagger trying to deceive people and wrote articles that he knew were untrue, he decided to become honest in 2007. Okay. Significantly, he has for some time been assisting the claimant's legal team unpaid to assemble evidence alongside Dr. Evan Harris, who has been working as a paralegal throughout this litigation, which he strongly supports. Mr. Johnson said that not only is he unpaid in his role, but he has spent substantial sums of his own money, and in one case guaranteed a potential cost liability of a dependent to seek to obtain documentary evidence or affidavits sworn by those individuals in wrongdoing. He said that he has received threats from some of those implicated in his investigations and threats about his intention to give evidence at this trial. I'm assuming he's referencing Gavin Burrows, but who knows? It was as a result of Mr. Johnson's evidence at an earlier stage of these proceedings from about 2017 that the claimants were able to make applications for disclosure in relation to identified private investigators. Mr. Johnson had made 7 interlocutory witness statements before his first trial witness statement in March 2023, which itself was followed by 2 further witness statements. Now, the backstory and word on the street is that Graham Johnson had been fabricating evidence and pretty much forging people's signatures. I mean, this was the whole situation with Gavin Burrows and Christine Hart. These are 2 private investigators who are also involved in this case. They had been very vocal about the authenticity of the evidence that he had provided. And the justice does talk a little bit about it in this judgment summary, acknowledging notwithstanding this, Mr. Johnson came under sustained attack and cross examination about his background as a confessed liar and deceiver. The accuracy of the account that he gave about particular events, including his own involvement in phone hacking, and the truth of his evidence that he had obtained from various potential witnesses' signed statements or affidavits, or had made detailed notes of what they said. Mr. Johnson then later produced the signed statements and notes to which he had referred, and the allegation of lying about this was properly withdrawn. However, the suggestion that he had lied about what he was told by Paul Smith on the Sunday Mirror sports desk remained. I think what's frustrating about this is that even though MGM did bring forward contesting the evidence that was brought forward and accusing him of it not being authentic and that he was lying, the judge still allowed this evidence because of the mere fact he put it forward and showed it. Not that they went into investigating, was this authentic or not? It was the fact that he brought it forward. And, moving into the next point where the fact that Graham Johnson lied about this statement told by Paul Smith should be an indicator enough to challenge everything. Once you lie once, you have to question everything else, but he doesn't. So one is left in, the other is pulled out, and he's still seen as a credible witness. Make that make sense. And then the justice states that Graham Johnson really was doing this because he's turned a new leaf and he was assisting the claimants because he really wants to take down this organized crime of the Rupert Murdoch empire, essentially. So here's where it gets interesting. The justice then weighs in his assessment of Graham Johnson, in which he says, these matters give rise to obvious and quite serious concerns about the reliability of some, at least, of Mr. Johnson's evidence. He is far from an independent witness. There seem to me to be obvious risks that Mr. Johnson, A, will himself give or procure from others evidence that is calculated to serve his own objective and so stray from the truth. If that is not a risk of invention, then it is at least a risk of exaggeration. B, may give evidence that does not amount to the whole truth and be selective. This was proved to be so in that he omitted any reference to Christine Hart in his witness statement because, as he said, she has been threatening him, and because he wanted to sign her up for evidence that he could publish. And C, may not be able sufficiently to differentiate the evidence that he is personally able to give from the case that he wishes to see advanced. What's alarming here to me is Graham Johnson was one of the main witnesses for this court hearing. And the justice states, I keep these firmly in mind in assessing the reliability of the evidence that he gave. I also bear in mind that he has almost always been proved right about the allegations that he made in his earlier witness statements. Well, if this is a racket and they have a template of what wins, and backing into fabricating and creating evidence that looks reliable and authentic, then yeah, I could see you being fooled. What bothers me here is that there is an element of doubt. There are people contesting the authenticity, and here he is giving him the benefit of the doubt by saying, my overall impression of Mr. Johnson was that he was very straightforward and matter of fact in the way that he answered questions, and that he answered all the questions that were put to him and did not dissemble or attempt to avoid them. He readily admitted his crimes and misdemeanors of the past, but regarded that as being so far behind him that it was almost an irrelevance, save in so far as it gave him an understanding of what other journalists and PIs were doing. So he's essentially giving Graham Johnson the benefit of the doubt, even though in this very same hearing he was caught in a lie, as well as people were challenging the evidence that he was bringing forward. Just because he produced receipts and they checked out in the sense of visually showing this without any type of investigation onto the evidence that was there to validate that they were authentic, to me is troubling. I guess what is mind boggling to me is trying to understand why this witness was admissible, even though the justice right before this is saying that there is risk, right? He uses the word risk, that some of what he's saying may not be truthful, and that perhaps maybe this was serving an agenda, and then mentioning Christine Hart, who, yes, was challenging the credibility of Graham Johnson. Why, if there's so much risk here, was that even being allowed to be considered and then give the assessment that, yes, he was straightforward, even though he was called out for a lie and it's in the record? It makes no sense to me. I would think that once you're caught lying, then everything else can't be trusted. I don't know how the UK court system is, but from what I'm gathering, they really do like to go on feelings versus the facts. We saw this with Megan when she said that, oh, it wasn't my intention to mislead the court. I'm truly sorry. I forgot. Why does the UK court system continuously give people who have known histories of lying the benefit of the doubt? Is beyond me. I don't know. Scobie was proven to be a liar. Graham Johnson had lied. Meghan Markle had lied. Prince Harry had lied. But all of them have been given the benefit of the doubt because of their feelings and what they say is their truth. We see this contradiction now in bullet number 246, in which the justice says, however, some of the explanations that he gave for what he had done were not wholly convincing. Mind you, the bullet before he says his overall impression was that Mr. Johnson was being straightforward and that he is a changed man. Makes no sense to me here when he starts to cite examples of faulty evidence and then finally concludes with, overall, I consider Mr. Johnson to be broadly reliable in what he says about private investigators. save in relation to the points that I've mentioned above. I have, however, considered carefully in each case where it is important the reliability of evidence that he gives that is not supported by another witness or by documentary evidence. This includes evidence that he gives on the basis of unidentified journalistic sources. See, I don't get how he comes to this conclusion because he cites in many instances where there is evidence of doubt as well as lying going on. But he's still giving this guy the benefit of the doubt and being credible. This guy, Graham Johnson, has been like a star witness in all these court cases against the Rupert Murdoch empire for phone hacking. So it's my guess and my opinion that by now, Graham Johnson knows what works and what doesn't work, whether it be how they put information together, the story that they craft, how convincing they can be in telling this story. He must have told these stories 1,000 times over. So, rightfully so, if you've rehearsed the script, you know it by heart, then sure, you can act it out and be convincing. What I don't like here is that there is evidence of lying and even stating that there are points where he felt that he wasn't convinced or felt that it was being swayed towards an agenda. Why was this admissible? Is what I want to understand. If you guys know, leave your thoughts below on the UK court system. We see the same thing when it comes to Prince Harry. And I think a lot of this decision and the way that this decision was written out was to, one, appease the public because of it being a high profile case. You have to understand the judge might, in his head, think, well, I don't want the backlash if I shut this down and not award him. I do feel bad. He is the king's son. Yeah, no doubt that there would have been a lot of criticism that would have came if he didn't award the king's son something to make him feel like he's validated. And that's what I see here because throughout the explanation, the justice, time and time after again, was frustrated. He admits that here, as well as he does say that a lot of these things that Harry brought up were not valid. I mean, out of the 33 articles that they brought forward, only 15 were legit. And rightfully so, because the evidence proved itself, not because of what Harry stated, but because of the actual evidence that was seen. And I think a lot of the judgment that was placed on those 15 were based off of the evidence and testimonies of the people that Harry brought forward. And when you look at that, in my opinion, just looking at everything from a holistic perspective, you can't trust it. So, in my opinion, Harry should have received nothing because the people that were brought forward were also put in question. And the tactics that were used in the court case by David Sherborne gets blasted in this document, but nowhere is the press reporting that. Nowhere is talking about how the justice was frustrated with Harry's team and the evidence that was brought forward. Who could forget that in the 11th hour, David Sherborne comes in with his closing statement by throwing a whole bunch of additional information that he wanted the court to consider, in which the judge said no. And I think it's super important to point out what the media is not reporting in this biased reflection of what happened with this judgment. The judge writes, I record here frustration that as a result of the claimants significantly overloading their case for what was only going to be a 7-week trial, the court has been left with a very substantial volume of material raising issues for decision on which very little help was given at the trial and no argument addressed, simply because the parties did not have time to do so. In effect, a swath of material has been dumped on the court with a request for a paper determination on top of all the issues that were properly ventilated and explored at trial. I also record annoyance that, as a consequence of the parties' inability or unwillingness to communicate sensibly between themselves during the trial, which recurred far too frequently, the parties' cases on the same issues have been presented in writing only in two totally different formats, which do not cross refer to each other, and without MGM having an opportunity to respond to the claimant's episodes document in the way that they might have wished to. And you can tell the justice is pissed off with what he says next. The consequence is that I have had to spend extra time trying to do the cross referencing. The blame on this occasion lies squarely with the claimants. Had their intention to represent the invoice's claim as episodes been raised, it's likely that I would have approved it and given MGM time to respond to that document instead of expending its efforts on responding to the previous schedules. There you have it, folks. We know that David Sherborne and the gang were playing dirty. And here's why I don't understand why this case was not thrown out. The justice then states many of the allegations have zero credibility and seem to have been included in a list indiscriminately. The justice did throw Harry a bone in recognizing that the people in his orbit, like Chelsea Davy, Guy Pelly, Tiggy, all were part of this intrusion, unwarranted. And I do believe that based on that is where Harry was given some grace in being affected by this. But overall, the justice didn't believe that Harry was being monitored and hacked on an ongoing basis. In fact, he does limit the window of time in which he believes that there was unlawful information gathering. Now, I'd like to put a spotlight on this part in where the justice is describing how he came to the assessment in awarding the damages, in which he writes, "It is also material that the feeling of being oppressed and the loss of privacy and distress that the Duke describes generally was the cumulative result of all the media activity that was surrounding him. Even now, it is clear to what extent other newspaper publishers and particular newspaper journalists were conducting unlawful information gathering and voicemail interference directed at the Duke. He has other legal actions pending, and he has made many allegations against them. On any view, the Duke's misery caused by press behavior, which MGN acknowledged, was not the fault of MGM alone. And I can only properly award damages against MGN for its contribution to the consequences of unlawful activity, not general hounding of the Duke by the press that does not involve any unlawful information gathering." And I think this is the justice's way of saying that this intrusion and the stress that Harry has been feeling is not just limited to MGN, but it's also the media in general, which Harry is partially responsible for it because he contributes to it. And I would have liked to have seen somewhere that being mentioned that it is a double-edged sword in what Harry is talking about. Now, from my perspective, Harry can't really claim that he's a victim of privacy and media intrusion, especially when he's in bed with the media and pushing out propaganda on a daily basis. As much as Harry wants, he can't really have it both ways. I think what's important to state here is that the justice found that the Duke's case of voicemail interception and unlawful information gathering proved in part only, not holistically, but in part only. He found 15 out of the 33 articles that were tried were a product of phone hacking of his mobile phone or mobile phones of his associates, or the product of other unlawful information gathering. He considered that Harry's phone was only hacked to a modest extent and that this was probably carefully controlled by certain people at each newspaper. However, it did happen on occasions from about the end of 2003 to April 2009, which was the date of the last article that was provided. There was a tendency for the Duke and his evidence to assume that everything published was the product of voicemail interception because of phone hacking. Anyhow, the phone hacking was not the only journalistic tool that was available at the time, and his claims in relation to the other 18 articles did not stand up to careful analysis, and that was the justice's assessment. So, in the end, it boiled down to the justice awarding damages in respect to each of the articles and invoices that he saw were unlawful information gathering and was proved. He also awarded a further sum to compensate Harry for his mental anguish and suffering. Also included in the sum was the additional £15,000 for the aggravated damages to reflect particular hurt and sense of outrage that Harry felt because the two directors of the newspaper, whom the board had delegated day-to-day responsibility for such matters, knew about the illegal activity and didn't stop it. And I think that that's fair. So there you have it, folks. Justice is served. The bigger question is, Do you think it was all worth it? Now you have to think about, well, how much did Harry invest with the lawyers? How much were the court fees? Think about the time that was spent. Let's not forget he flew over in a private jet to attend the court hearings. What did that cost? When you look at it at the end of the day, this might actually be a huge loss for him, even though he's on this crusade. And technically, this wasn't a groundbreaking court case because this phone hacking thing has been going on since 2011. Harry's not the first to have brought claims against the newspaper for this phone hacking scandal. Before I go, I'd like to take a moment and talk about how this is being reflected in the media and what people are saying online, just to give you a gauge as to how this is being perceived and taken. So, according to NPR today, they write with the headline Prince Harry wins a landmark phone hacking case against one of Britain's major tabloids. So, there again, how is this landmark when this has been going on with other cases in relation to the Levinson inquiry? I'm just putting that out there. They're making this sound like Harry is the pioneer on this one. For dramatics, the article kicks off saying, hounded by paparazzi all his life, Britain's Prince Harry won a legal victory Friday against a UK newspaper group he accused of hacking into his voicemail in the early 2000s to get scoops. It's a vindication for Harry, who has blamed what he calls a poisonous UK tabloid culture in part for a fallout with his family. Oh, so now the media is going to be the reason, not Meghan Markle and all her lies. Okay. His decision to step down as a working royal and his 2020 move to California with his American wife, Meghan Markle, and their children. Oh, I thought Harry was forced out by the family, but now it's the British media. And for the most part, this is what all the media outlets that we know Harry and Meghan use have been reiterating and driving in their messaging. And from what I gather, the left and the center media outlets both discuss Prince Harry's victory in his phone hacking lawsuit. However, the left emphasizes heavily the illegal methods used by MGM, whereas the center and right briefly mentions the extent of phone hacking. From the left side, the traditional media outlets Harry gives propaganda to, it's like using language of illegal interception and unlawful methods to portray Harry as this victim, which is what we know they want. However, like from other articles and what I've been seeing, they adopt a more neutral tone and describes the ruling as a result of so-called modest hacking and it being some cases talking about the Levinson inquiry, which I think is important. As you can see, they're making him look like one big superhero. As you can see, they're making him look like a superhero on this matter when, I mean, really, this has been going on for a while. But anyhow, I'm going to stop here as this video is over 30 minutes. Come back, make sure you're subscribed, and you don't want to miss the next video because I will be going through Prince Harry's statement that he released regarding his win here on this. And we'll talk about the hypocrisy in that video. Anyhow, let me know your thoughts. As always, I will be back with more content. But until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.
It was such a fraud.